Hello guys, I'm sure this is going to be a little surprising for you because we have never done this before. But then because we have been missing out on our sessions for a long time, I thought that let's try something new. Why to wait for coordinating sessions when we can do something like this? So we are left with, that way we are left with many more sessions, but then on our train of thoughts, we are left with sections which deal with opposition of patents. Now they deal with both pre and post grant. Now before we jump into that, let's do a little recap as we always do. So how do we start? Let's start with section 2 itself. Now when do we get into section 2? So let's say we have an idea, we have some kind of invention that we want to go ahead with. If somebody comes to you and say that I have an idea, so what are the things that you're going to talk about it? So you are of course going to talk about, you would define it as new invention. Now what is a new invention? A new invention which has an inventive step. Now then you will define what is inventive step. Inventive step can be defined as technical advancement or economic significance, or something which has, or any product or process which has industrial applicability. So this would be your new invention as we know, or invention as we know. Now moving from there, we move to section 3. Now I hope all of you remember section 3 by heart now, section 3A to 3K. In the normal class, I would have asked what is section 3E, what is section 3F, or what is section 3H. But then also let's discuss what is section 3D, we know 3E. Now 3E is mirrored admixture. Now what is the principle or key term that we look forward in mirrored admixture? That is synergistic effect or synergistic impact, let's say. Now similarly, when we go to 3F is arrangement, rearrangement, right? And then 3D is very important, where we talk about new form of a known substance is not patentable unless it provides an improved efficacy, I believe. Yeah, efficacy, what I believe, yeah. Then we have 3K, which is very important section. Then we have 3P, which talks about traditional knowledge. Now, once that is also done, we do a little check about section 4 also. Now, what is section 4? Atomic energy. Any invention related to atomic energy is not patentable. Now, moving onwards, where we have decided that we have something that can be patentable, or that can be patented, sorry. Now, what do? We move on to identifying who the inventor is, or let's say who has the right to apply for a patent application for an invention. Now that is dealt by what? Section 6. Yes, now I am sure all of you know about it. Now section 6 says who has the right to apply. So we know that any person who is true and first inventor can apply for it. Now if true and first inventor can apply, then of course an assignee of the true and first inventor can also apply, or a legal representative of assignee can also apply for the invention. Now as we are talking about applying for the invention, of course we would talk about how to apply for the invention, that is forms. What kind of forms do we need to use? So we have section 7 that comes right after section 6 that talks about forms of the invention. Now first thing that we need to worry about is that the application should always be for one invention. This is very important, right? And who decides it? Claims. If there are multiple claims, then what happens? They need to be cognate, or they need to be connected by single inventive concept, right? We discussed that under section 10 also. Now going back to the forms that we were talking about, so section 7 talks about form. So the first form is of course the proof of right to apply. So proof of right to apply can be done using section form 1. There is a section there wherein the inventors need to sign that we are assigning these rights to the applicant, which is there. Now in case the applicants or inventors are not same, then the applicant also needs to declare that to his best knowledge these guys are the true and first inventors. Now once we have done that, we also know that we need to file the specification. Now specification can be a provisional specification or a complete specification, we know that, right? Now remember this thing that you are going wrong all the time. In case of PCT application, in case of convention application, in case of national phase applications, we cannot have provisional specification, right? We always will have complete specification. How many of you have gone wrong multiple times? Whenever I say that, can I convert regular application to a provisional application, or a provisional application to a regular application when we are talking about convention application or a national phase application. We cannot do that. For provisional application is only for ordinary application which are first filed in India. That's the only case. So I think that with that, section 7 is done. Now we know that any application which has been filed in India can have similar application being filed in other countries also. Now in that case, section 8 has two parts to it. So once you are filing an application, you need to file a statement which provides the details about all the applications that you have filed outside India. While you do so, you also need to take an undertaking that before the grant of the application or refusal of the application, time to time, those are 6 months basically, within 6 months I need to provide information to the controller about what's happening with my counter application in the other countries. Now that is 8.1 A and B. Now you have 8.2 also, which is like, so first one was from the applicant's point of view, second one is from the controller's point of view. Now the controller can also seek in between these 6 months also any other information, and that information needs to be supplied by the applicant as and when the controller is seeking for it. Now we know that we have identified the forms. So section 8 talks about form 3, section 7 talks about form 1, form 3, form 5 and form 2. Now form 2 can have regular application also or provisional application also. So there we go to section 9. Now section 9 says that you can file a provisional application, but if you file a provisional application, you need to convert it into a regular application within 12 months. That is 9.1. If you don't do so, what happens? The application gets abandoned, right? Now 9.2 talks about if you can file a provisional application, you can file multiple provisional applications also, right? Now in that case also, these provisional applications can be combined to have single complete specification. How? Of course the invention has to be cognate, or the claims which are coming out of this provisional application needs to be linked by a single inventive concept. The controller needs to be of that view. Now when you are doing that, the 12 months would be calculated from the earliest provisional application. All sorted out. Now section 3 talks about, let's say you didn't file a provisional application, you directly filed a complete specification. Now can you convert it to a regular application, provisional application? Of course you can do it. So within 12 months from the filing of the complete specification, you can complete the complete specification into a provisional application. We all know that, I'm just revising it, 9.3. Now 9.4 is the breakup, where I don't want the provisional application. So anytime before the grant of the patent, I can drop the provisional application and my priority date or my filing date will become the complete specification date. So section 9 is done. Now we know how to file, we know when to file. Now we need to know what to file. Now what to file is defined by section 10. Now if you remember how a particular patent application looks, we always have a title first. So section 10 talks about title, what the title needs to do. Then we have drawings, which always form a part of the specification, right? Now you don't need to have drawings all the time, but whenever you have drawings, they would always form a part of the complete specification. And then time to time, let's say if the controller thinks so that a model or a working model can ease the understanding of the invention, then the model can be supplied to the controller, but then the model will not make a part of the specification. Very important. So drawings make part of the specification, models don't make a part of the specification. Then moving on, what do we have? 10.4. So 10.4 talks about the specification, right? So specification needs to be defined properly. So defined properly in the sense, what is the language? Let me just open it up. So the language, it says fully and particularly describe the invention and its operation or use of it and the method by which it needs to be performed. So that is the specification needs to be there. So we need to fully and particularly describe the invention and its operation or its use or how it needs to be operated. Now with that, there is another requirement, which is 4B, which is best method, best mode of operation of invention, which is very important. If you don't describe that, then also it can be invalidated or it can be challenged that you have not actually disclosed the best mode of operation of it. Now moving on, then we have the claims 10.3. So end with the claim. claims define, and what do we do? The claim defines the scope of the invention. So we are done with that. Now finally, abstract. Now there is one important aspect about abstract is the controller has the right to amend the abstract to for the purpose of ease of understanding, or let's say enabling the people to understand what this invention actually relates to, because abstract provides the technical information. Now once we have done that, we go to the biological material, where let's say the invention is around biological material, or biological material has been disclosed in the specification, but of course you cannot fully describe it, or you cannot provide the best mode of operation. So the requirements are not satisfied. So what do you have to do? You have to deposit it. Where can you deposit? The International Depository Authorities. Now India also has one, which is MTCC, Microbial Type Cultural Connection Center, Gene Bank, right? So MTCC is there, which is there in Chandigarh. So we remember that. Now there is a whole way of describing it. We are not going too deep into it. Now section 10 again talks about the claims. The 10.5 says that the claims of the invention should relate to only one inventive concept. If there are multiple claims in it, all of them should be related by a single inventive concept. That's important. And the claims should be clear and succinct, and should be fairly based on the specification. These four things, or let's say three things, are very important. First is they should be linked by inventive concept. They should be clear and succinct, means they should not be ambiguous. They should clearly disclose what the invention is. And finally, they should be fairly based on the specification. That's very important. You cannot have a claim which is not supported by the specification of the application that you have provided. And then what else? So finally, once we have filed the application, we get the priority date. Now we understand priority date. Remember all those questions where you had multiple, so you have one provisional application, another provisional application. So if the claims are partly disclosed in this, partly disclosed in this, then what happens? Whenever we are talking about partly, we always go towards the later part of it. When we are talking about that it was equally divided, or let's say it was described in both these provisional applications, then we go to the earliest priority date. Remember, partly, then later. Equally, we go to the first one. So that's how the priority date is. And priority date is, of course, now if the priority date is claimed from a convention application, we go to the convention application. If the priority date is claimed from a PCT, we go to the PCT. The priority date is very important because that's where the examination, that's where the novelty, that's where the inventiveness of an invention is decided. So priority is very important. From there, all the dates are the term of the patent, the publication of the patent, the examination deadline, everything is disclosed based on the priority date of the invention. So section 11 completely talks about the priority date of the claim. So basically each claim will have a priority date. Understand that also. Multiple claims can have multiple priority date because they may be disclosed in one or other specification. So we need to worry about that. Was there anything important in that? I think we have discussed it multiple times. So and of course, so when we are talking about priority date, let's say if there was a post dating, remember, where 9 provisional was converted to complete specifications, complete specification was converted to provisional, or provisional was dropped off from a complete specification, then the priority date accordingly will change. So we are good with that. Now after this, what will happen? After this, publication happens, and we know effect of publication also. So best effect of publication is, of course, all the details about the application gets published, and of course you have the like privileges and the rights as if a patent was granted on that date, but you cannot institute any litigation, any suit of infringement against any infringer, but your rights accrue from there. That's an important aspect of it. So effect of publication is very important from that angle. That way section 11A is important in terms of what all needs to be done. But while we are talking about it, we also know that there is a buffer period, or there is some kind of a dark period within which no publication happens. But then, does it mean I cannot have an early publication? I can have an early publication. If I have an early publication, what happens? All those things gradually follows. So there is no request that you need to submit for a normal publication, but for an expedited publication, you need to early publication, sorry, not an expedited publication. Early publication, you need to send a request for early publication. Now another thing is remember secrecy. So when there is a secrecy provision, the publication will be hold. It will not get published as and when the secrecy provisions are invoked. So that is done case. Now what else do we have? So once the secrecy provisions are invoked, of course the publication will happen. Now can I withdraw before publication? Yes, I can withdraw before publication. Now all of us by now know that within 18 months, if the early publication has not been opted for, not within 18 months, after 18 months the application gets published. So if I have to stop the publication, then by 15th month I need to withdraw my application, because after 15 months the technical preparation starts for publishing an application. So that is your section 11A. Now no examination happens before publication, because people need to know what is out there in the patent office before examination happens. And another thing, patent office will not take up work unless requested for, right? We discussed that. So unless a request for examination is filed within 48 months from the priority date. Now that priority date, we all know from where the priority date will get established, from convention, from PCT, or from a provisional application. So for 48 months from there on, we need to file a request for examination. Does it mean I cannot file request for examination right at the start? No, I can file anytime from the date of filing to the date of 48 month that we calculated from there. Now from there, now another important aspect that we discussed, who can request for examination? Of course, the applicant, we know, based on the question that has come earlier. The inventors can also do it, and then a person interested, section 2T, who is person interested, right? So that can also file for request for examination. But in that case, who receives the examination report? Now all of you know, the applicant receives the request. No, applicant receives the examination report from the controller. So we know that. Now once the request for examination is filed, all that happens. But if within 48 months, if it has not been filed, then the application is considered to be withdrawn. In secrecy provision also, after the secrecy provision has been lifted off, you can so after secrecy provision, you may receive, let's say, a buffer of 3 months or 6 months. We'll check on those once we receive on rules, by when you need to file request for examination. I know you know all this, but I'm just trying to build a train of thoughts before we jump into the opposition matter. So once the request for examination has been submitted, so what happens? The application needs to be published. If it has not been published, it will get published, and all that will happen. Now the controller receives the request of examination. Controller needs to distribute the work to its examiner. Now what all things need to be done by the examiner? So we have 3 things that we need to worry about. So the application, the specification, and the documents thereof. 3 things: application, specification, and documents thereof. So examiner actually goes through all these things to understand or to know or to evaluate whether these have been prepared in accordance with the act or not. So that is one thing that he needs to do. Now another thing that he, from straight off his head, he thinks that is there a lawful ground to refuse the grant of the application? And then of course the prior art search that needs to be done, that is called investigation of anticipation. Investigations under section 13 that happens, right? And then any other matter which may be prescribed. So the examiner who receives this need to prepare this report, taking into account all the 4 things that we discussed, and submit a report to the controller. Now moving on to the investigation. Now investigation is based on the anticipation, based on the novelty, based on the obviousness that we have, the parameters that we always worry about. Now they have divided into 2 parts. One is Indian specification, another is general publication, right? General specification, basically any other country's patent application. And the third thing is, of course, any other document that is there. Now, the first thing they talk about is if the invention has been anticipated by publication of any specification which was filed in India, basically, because published before the filing date of the patent that we are talking about, or it is claimed in a claim of any specification which was filed on or before the priority date of our invention. So basically priority date is what we are talking about. So this is 13 one AB where we are talking about complete specification, second we are talking about claims, and then we talk about publication of any specification of any other country basically, right? Now third, they talk about, let's say if you amend an application, then the entire process begins. That's the case. Now 13.4 talks about no warranty, no guarantee, and no liability. Patent office, government office, right? So they may give you a grant, but then doesn't mean that it's a warranty or it's a liability. It's the best effort basis. So they may have given you a grant, but that doesn't mean that it would cannot be challenged. That's about it. Now after that, what happens? The controller receives the report. Controller goes over it and thinks that if it is, let's say, a negative report or it may impact the applicant, then he submits it to them. So he provides a gist of the examination report to the applicant. This is the process where FER gets issued all the time, right? And then section 15 talks about the power of controller for the amendments. Basically, you can amend the specification. Then moving, so from here I'm taking a break. We are not talking about divisional application because we don't need to worry about it. So till this point we understand what all things happen. Now let's now during this process what all can happen. Now we are still in the pre-grant phase, right? The application has not been granted. So is there a way somebody can, let's say that, okay, this application has been published and I don't like this application. Now there could be a reason. I may genuinely feel that this is a low quality patent, or I may genuinely feel that my business or my research or anything that I am doing may get impacted if this application get granted or an invention get granted on this, right? So what can I do? So there is a section. So there is a provision in our Patents Act, which is 25(1). 25, let's say, opposition of patents. Now let's focus on opposition of patents. Now there are two phases of the patent. In the application phase, which is pre-grant, and then one is the grant phase, which is application has been granted by the patent office. Now here we will only talk in terms of, let's make it easy in terms of, so that we remember what all grounds are there, right? So first thing that to remember is 25(1) because it is one. So this is pre-grant phase, of course, right? So so the term that is used here is any person in writing represent by way of opposition. So represent by way of opposition. So you are representing the position to the controller. So represent by way of opposition to the controller. May object to the grant of the patent. Now what all grounds? Now think about all the grounds that you can think of. Section 6, or maybe before section 6, let's say section 2 talks about new invention, inventive step, or obviousness, right? Or so that, or anticipated basically, right? So section 2, it is not